Could there already be trouble in Minnesota with J.J. McCarthy's contract? Yeah, probably not. Welcome to Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who listen to Locked On Vikings each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much, especially those of you who are around in June every day. You guys are like, keep this thing afloat, and I love you for it. If you are new here, hello and welcome. My name is Luke, and you can find this show by searching out Locked On Vikings anywhere you find your favorite shows, as well as YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku, where you got to download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Today on the show, most of the show is actually going to be about Dwight McGlothern. So that's going to be what we do. We'll talk about his Everyman Series entry, where we'll go over his backstory, as well as the fact that he maybe is popping off a little bit in the first part of minicamp OTAs, like the first part of the offseason program, which is over now. But he ended up with the first team, so we'll get into that as well. But first, there's a rumor that came out on Tuesday about J.J. McCarthy potentially holding out if he doesn't get his signing bonus 100% paid up front, which the Vikings have never done before. That's the headline. That is way scarier sounding than it actually is. So everybody chill out a little bit. So this is, let me explain, I guess, what I think is going on here. So I was curious about this when I first saw it. And I guess the first thing is this rumor comes from a Twitter account that is not like an established like legacy reporter. This is not publicized like a published report. This is a tweet from somebody who has been right about some stuff in the past and has earned a little bit of credibility that way. But because they aren't like a credentialed, like an established reporter, there's always going to be that question, those questions around like framing and how did this leak? Usually if you hear something leaked by like Schefter, usually it's because someone wants you to know it. This is just maybe like a true leak, and you never know exactly what kind of game of telephone was played. So big grain of salt, always, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, it's not that crazy for a rookie quarterback and the first top 10 pick the Vikings have had in 12 years to be the guy that kind of changes the way that they approach things here. So rookie contracts are basically entirely pre-negotiated. The guarantees are full. The amounts are dictated by a wage scale. The payout structures and all that are all very boilerplate. There can be no incentives. There can be no any other fancy stuff. It is a very boilerplate contract. There are two things that typically get negotiated with these rookie contracts. One is offset language, which you might remember from the Roquan Smith rookie deal thing with the Bears back when he got drafted. And what that means is that if he were to get cut and then another team were to sign him, who pays out the rest of his guarantees? With offset language, let's say the Bears were to cut him before his rookie contract was up, another team could pick him up, and with offset language, that team would continue paying out the guaranteed money, and it would go on their cap instead of the Bears. It kind of makes it so that if you get cut, you're that much harder to sign, so players don't like it, but of course it would help a team if they had it, so that's a thing to negotiate. The second thing is the payout structure of the signing bonus, not the amount of the signing bonus. This is not a salary cap thing. The salary cap doesn't care about any of that, any of this signing bonus stuff. This is literally like the physical cash flow, and it is atypical for a signing bonus to be paid out in full as a true lump sum, actually. Usually it's paid out in like 2 to 4 installments. And I'm getting that information from Joel Corey, who wrote about this last year. He's a former agent, and he weighs in on this stuff a lot. So usually you'll get that in 2 to 4 installments. And I guess I don't really know why it like is that specifically. I'm going to guess, hey, you've got that money in your bank account for 2 more months. That's 2 more months you can make dividends off it, and you're fighting over that or something like that. But it also slows down the payout, right? So the player's going to want it. And in the last few years, especially since the 2020 CBA was negotiated, top 3-4 picks and quarterbacks have been successful at persuading the team that drafted them to give them the signing bonus all in one go. Trevor Lawrence got that, and then Zach Wilson and Trey Lance kind of did the same thing, where those rookie deals a couple years ago went all the way up to the end of or to the beginning of training camp. And I think Trey Lance signed his like the day before camp opened, and he got the fully guaranteed thing. I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen here, where JJ McCarthy's rookie contract gets signed the day before camp, and then we never talk about it again. I would be pretty surprised if the Vikings tried to play chicken with this and actually like incurred a holdout. For one, it is kind of small potatoes. It's the same amount getting paid, and you're arguing about payout structure and like the timing of it. So it's pretty small potatoes. It doesn't have anything to do with the on-field product. Like staring a player that's going to hold out for a bigger contract in the face because you don't want to pay him more money and you don't think that that's worth it. There's like a logic to that, right? Where it's like, okay, if we're not going to get you, but we'd rather have that than to pay you this much more because of the value on the salary cap and what we could maybe do with that money elsewhere. But with this, it has no impact on what you can do to pay other players. It's just the Wilfs. And to be honest, you kind of have to have like an ego owner situation for them to like really care that much about a player. Like they'd have to be like, you're going to try to hold out over bonus structure. Get in your place, kid. I'm not going to do. And then you'd like have like a situation. And that's just kind of never been the way the Wilfs operate. They've always been willing to up the spending. They've always been willing to shell out when they need to. Even with the Justin Jefferson contract, I think they just physically couldn't get that money liquid in time. But then, when it was time to do the same thing at a higher scale, no hesitation. They spent a ton on the facility and the stadium and all that stuff. They've always been willing to do that. Of all of the criticisms people may have of the Wilfs, valid or otherwise, they don't Red McCombs this, right? They don't skimp. If Red McCombs still owned the Vikings, I'd be a little worried. Not really with the Wilfs. So all in all, there's a lot of reasons to not really care about this. And honestly, I almost never talk about rookie contracts. I think this particular situation is interesting, and it's good, every once in a while to say, here's the actual things that people are negotiating. Those are basically the two things: offset language and signing bonus payout structure. And they're all small potatoes, which means they always get done. I think Roquan Smith, I can't remember the last guy that like actually did do a holdout and like missed camp over their rookie contract instead of Roquan Smith. Let me know if you're watching on YouTube. Let me know in the comments who else did, because I feel like there was another one that I can't remember, but it's really rare. It doesn't happen, and my guess is that the Vikings are just going to give him the full lump sum signing bonus, just like all the other quarterbacks got. And the reason the Vikings haven't done this before, it's like easy, I think, to assume, oh, well, yeah, because that's not their MO or whatever. But it's because they haven't had a top 10 pick. They haven't had a top 15 pick, but for a couple of times. Like, they haven't had a guy that like kind of warrants that level. And if you look at like the rookie wage scale, because at the top, the numbers are a little bigger, it becomes actually worth people's time to fight over this. But once you're to pick 20, whatever. So you're not going to get this kind of thing with like a Jordan Addison who went 23rd. Ultimately, it's small potatoes, and it's not really worth spending a whole bunch more time on. So instead, let's move on to the Everyman series, today featuring Dwight McGlothern. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets. And whether you're going to something like a Twins game or a sporting event in your area, or even, a comedy show or a theater or a concert, you can find last-minute tickets on Gametime. And sometimes that's the way to do it. You can save up to 60% finding last-minute tickets, because ultimately people are just trying to get rid of their tickets at a certain point, whether, you're 2 seconds away from the event starting or even an hour into the event starting. You can still find tickets on Gametime, and by then people are just trying to get rid of them and get anything for them. You can get a really good deal that way. Gametime will help you navigate that and give you the lowest price guarantee. If you find the same section and row elsewhere, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, go to the live tab of the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube page, and you can find me eating hot wings. You should enjoy that. I suffered a lot for it, and still am. It was a punishment for getting a bunch of bets wrong this year. That was my last place punishment. I housed him. I did my duty. Go check it out. But now, welcome to the Everyman series, where we go over the backstories and the journey to the NFL for each new Minnesota Viking. And today's entry will be Dwight McGlothern. He goes by Nudie. I couldn't find why his nickname is Nudie. I couldn't find the origin of that. So if anybody has it, I really, really want to know why he is called Nudie. Please tell me in the comments or on Twitter or whatever. But we're just going to have to get used to that together. But either way, he went to Klein Oak High School, which is just outside of Houston, like a 30-minute drive from Houston suburb. And he showed up as this like 6'2", super athletic kid that already knew how to play cornerback. But his head coach at Klein Oak said, hey, let's try, you're 6'2" and you're an athlete. Let's try you on both sides of the ball. So let's see if you can play receiver. And he's running this crossing route, or maybe it was like a dig or something over the middle, and the quarterback throws it way behind him, and he makes this like super athletic, like twisting behind him, one-handed grab. And the coach is like, I think you're going to play some wide receiver too. So he ends up being this two-way standout for Klein Oak High School. And he's a phenom. He's a 4-star recruit this whole time. There's all kinds of crazy stories. There's another one in an actual game where he's at cornerback and the ball gets like popped up and it sort of hangs in the air and becomes a tip drill. And he flies, as the coach tells it, 30 to 40 yards to go bring that thing down. And just this absolute insane display of athleticism. One of these kids that, and this high school has seen a couple other NFL players. So this coach has seen it and he goes, I have known 3 times that a player is going to make it in the NFL. And this is the 3rd time. And everybody knows it. And he knows it. And that's the other thing you kind of have to know about Nudie McGlothern is he has this very infectious swagger. I think that's the best way to put it. Infectious swagger. He has your classic cornerback energy where he has this like budding, boiling over confidence. And especially in the high school level, he backs it up. He's completely, he's just like clamps on guys. And in college as well, we'll get to it. It's a little up and down, but he's good and he's going to let you know that he's good. And in a way that really seeps into the rest of the team. And there's a great example of this. So at wide receiver, he scores a touchdown and he takes the ball and goes all the way out on the track and runs 100 and like gets down into a sprinter pose and runs a 100-yard dash, like as a celebration. It's absolutely hilarious. And another time later, after another big, I think it was another touchdown, he goes with a whole bunch of teammates and they run a relay around like the track outside the football field. Like he has that kind of display and the rest of the teammates go, oh, I want in on this next time. That's the energy that he has throughout everything from high school into his time at LSU, into his time at Arkansas, and I'm sure he still has it here in Minnesota as well, because it's just this innate thing to who he is. But that confidence as a defensive back, that confidence is vital. I talk about this all the time, this dog mentality that I want in cornerbacks, but I think it's been a while since I explained what I meant by that. As a cornerback, you have to play without an ounce of hesitation. Basically, nothing about cornerback works if you're hesitant. And that's not really like other positions. At QB, for example, you can hesitate a little bit and still kind of get away with it as long as you get like a fast release and you still throw it. A lot of quarterbacks in the NFL still make a living kind of waiting to see if things are actually going to like turn out the way they think they are. And anticipation's better and you want it, but like you can get away with it. It's not catastrophic if you're a little late sometimes. At O-line, sometimes you want to be hesitant, or at D-line, you want to be hesitant and see how things are going to play out so that you make sure you make the right decision, right? You'd rather be a little, slow and right than running yourself out of the play. At wide receiver, right? You're a little bit more proactive. You have to go quickly, but you get into the right situation and it becomes right to hesitate, like slowing down in a zone. Cornerback is a unique position insofar as hesitation is death every single time. There is absolutely no time to wait because wide receivers are going so fast. And because they do everything they want to do with suddenness and quickness and right off the bat, you get no time to second guess yourself, which is why I like it when cornerbacks have that energy where they could tell you that they are 7 feet tall, and by the end of the conversation, you believe them because they just have that much confidence. An unearned confidence. The thing that kills cornerbacks so often is you get beat once and it gets in your head, and then you start hesitating. You kind of have to, by nature of the position, if you get burned, you kind of have to say, that was a fluke, I'm still the greatest, and still play the same way you were playing before. It's this really unnatural thing. So it's encouraging that Dwight McGlothern has this, but it also kind of explains why he's a 4-star recruit. And he actually gets his first offer into a college his freshman year, and it's LSU, which is where he will end up committing. But he doesn't commit right away. He considers Arkansas and Georgia and all these, but he does end up at LSU, and it's a very classic LSU story of recruitment, which we've seen a few of these now with Ed Orgeron because the Vikings love the Tigers. But Ed Orgeron would do this. Like his recruiting move would be to kind of establish a relationship with high school players throughout so that when it came time for them to commit, he's been talking to them for 3 years. There was no way anybody else had a shot there. So he ends up going to LSU, and in college, that's where you start to see the swagger get a little bit challenged because this was LSU in 2020. This was Derek Stingley and Eli Ricks. These two guys are absolute stud corners for the Tigers. You're not getting on the field. And you're a freshman. Like, it's fine, right? But you got to now sit on the bench. And with the corner, because that confidence has absolutely no room to ever waver, every little thing that challenges it can ruin you and has ruined plenty of corners in the past. So he has to kind of deal with, sitting on the bench and going through that classic incubation period and learn how to kind of find that humility without losing his confidence. And that's a really, really tough line to walk. And we don't hear a lot from him in that time. And that's okay. 2021, same thing, still those players. And after 2021, LSU struggles, Ed Orgeron leaves, and Brian Kelly comes in. And now it's the Brian Kelly thing. And here's the second thing that I don't really know why it happened, but Dwight McGlothern will enter the transfer portal and go to Arkansas, where he'll find more success, but a whole other host of problems. When I was researching for this episode, I looked really hard to find like an explanation, even like a boilerplate one, and I just kind of failed to. So again, if you have like a statement from him or something, I would be very curious to see it about why he left LSU. But it's pretty easy to come up with a couple of guesses. The coaching staff completely changed over. His DB coach, Durante Jones, returned to the Minnesota Vikings. He, of course, maybe just didn't want to play for the Brian Kelly thing. He didn't feel like he had a chance to really prove himself his first 2 years, and now a new coaching staff is coming in that doesn't know him at all. Or maybe it was just his confidence, right? Maybe you just kind of needed a fresh start. And even if that wasn't the reason he decided to enter the transfer portal, when he does ultimately choose to go to Arkansas, that is what he's going to get. A fresh start among a totally different group that is a little bit less rife with NFL level talent. And he'll pretty quickly skyrocket to the top of that depth chart and be cornerback one for him. And you get these fun, because he stays in the SEC, so he gets these fun things against his these moments against his old LSU teammates. There's probably one moment I want to point out to you from LSU that's really cool. Like, he's really close with his teammates still, and you can still see him like tweeting throughout the last couple years. Anytime like somebody from LSU gets drafted or whatever, like when Jay Ward gets drafted, he's like, yeah, that's my guy. So it's very clearly not a bitter divorce at all. I think it's just looking for opportunity, and then, the change in the coaching staff. This kind of thing is just going to happen more in college. Would be my guess, but again, I'd like to know. But anyways, there is this fun moment. If you remember last year, there was this Jay Ward play against Florida where he made this like insanely athletic interception on the sideline where he had to like kind of get up off of his knees and like keep himself off of the sideline to get it because it bounced off of a teammate's head. Dwight McGlothern was that teammate. Yeah. Cool stuff. I don't know. Fun little coincidences. And of course the Durante Jones thing is a fun little coincidence, although maybe it isn't so much of an actual coincidence. But I digress. He's at Arkansas and he plays pretty well for the 2022 season. Actually could have declared, probably would have been drafted if he had declared for the draft. But I think he felt that momentum a little bit in Arkansas because and that's kind of what he cites. He says, he says the unfinished business thing. I'm going to go back to Arkansas and we're going to go back to school and I'm going to do one more year. I want to perfect my craft, all that stuff. But honestly, after a fairly frustrating stint at what had to be a fairly frustrating stint at LSU, finally getting in there and playing well and having a chance to do it, you want to prove what you can do, right? This will turn out to be a pretty bad call. And it's not like he could have known ahead of time, but week 2, he gets turf toe. He misses all but one snap. And then he kind of gets over that pretty quick, but then he gets a concussion and he misses a little bit of time too. And when you return to college, it's really easy to think, well, I'll only get better, right? So let me put out something, maybe I can get drafted higher. But you always forget the chance that you might get injured. That's the risk of this. You might get injured. A freshman might come take your job when you're out. His name was Jalen Braxton, and he just takes the CB1 job. And suddenly, even though Dwight McGlothern is out, he's out with a concussion for weeks. And then suddenly people are like, there's no way this is still a concussion, right? And they ask the head coach, and the head coach says, yeah, no, he's got to win his job back now. This kid has played, Jalen Braxton has played very well, and now Nudie has to win his job back. So again, frustrating. A blow to your confidence and a huge blow to your draft stock. That brings us to the NFL draft where McGlothern, who had showed out pretty well, and most people had him as a 5th-ish round kind of guy, he falls all the way out of the draft as, the guy that transferred who couldn't get playing time at LSU, then transferred, then lost his job there. That adds up into this sort of, it's really easy to look at that and say, well, maybe this guy just sucks, even though, he this 4-star recruit clearly isn't that bad. There's something incongruous about that. Nobody figures it out. Nobody drafts him. So he goes to the Vikings, where he reunites with Durante Jones. I have to imagine that helped a lot in getting him to come to Minnesota. And he's pretty early, of course, right? He's only had a few practices, but he did get to work in with the first team a little bit. Now there's this is not something I would usually report on, even in the Everyman series. However, it looked like he was playing pretty well and he was kind of standing out a little bit, so it might be a little more real. It is pretty common, especially Flores seemed to love this last year, but it is pretty common for third teamers to just get kind of tossed in with the ones every once in a while just to see how they do, right? And it's not we think you could genuinely start, let's try it. It's you deserve an opportunity to prove yourself against the best. Let's see what you can do against the best. And then we'll put you back with the 3s, and now you can't come and tell us that you didn't get a chance to prove yourself, right? So depends on how that goes. But what's interesting is I don't know if I see that a lot in OTAs and in minicamp. Been saying all offseason, kind of parroting Kevin O'Connell, that OTAs and minicamp are not a proving ground. They're a learning ground. So messing with depth chart stuff isn't really the goal. So I don't know, that kind of stood out to me. But that, at the very least, might get that confidence back. That confidence that has been so challenged over the college landscape, from LSU to transfer to losing his job at Arkansas as well. A little bit of confidence, get in for a couple of reps. If you hold your own against Justin Jefferson and go, wait, that's right, I'm really freaking good at football. And you can get that confidence back. That's going to be an interesting thing to look for on the first 2 days of camp. What do we see from McGlothern? Is he still with the 1s? Is this actually a real thing? Or did they put him back with the 3s and now he looks like he belongs with the 3s? You're going to know kind of immediately, I think, with what the deal is with Dwight McGlothern. And truly, we were just looking at this on the football party, if I remember it was a mailbag. I just kind of talked about the cornerback situation, where it is a difficult group to break into status quo wise. Like Byron Murphy, you're not taking his job, right? Caleb Evans and Andrew Booth have, I guess, the inside track. If they come out and have good camps, they're getting the job, and it doesn't matter what you do. But if they come out and have bad camps, which super could happen, then suddenly it opens up a lot. and you have a chance to not only make the roster, but maybe even earn playing time if you can play well. It's going to be a truer meritocracy, I think, because Caleb Evans had that same confidence thing, right? Or at least that's what I think happened to him in December. That game against the Bengals happened. He got beat by T. Higgins and kind of, was the laughing stock a little bit. And then he totally lost. He hesitated on tackles. And you saw what happened against Jahmyr Gibbs. That's still maybe the coolest Jahmyr Gibbs highlight from his whole rookie season is putting the Caleb Evans on skates. Who in this world can rediscover their confidence between McGlothern and Evans and Andrew Booth, who obviously his pro career hasn't gone the way he probably expected it to. Who can rediscover that confidence might be the guy that wins the job. The other thing, of course, to mention is special teams, right? Andrew Booth, I think, has a really good shot at the roster because he's really good at special teams. He's played a lot of special teams, and you kind of don't hope that your second round corner is playing special teams. You hope he's too important for that. But on special teams, he has played very well, which means he's not in that same, like, oh no, is he going to get cut world that like Lewis Cine is in, where Lewis Cine didn't play special teams at all last year. He was pretty bad at it in camp, and he didn't win that job. So he was inactive a whole bunch. Because of that, you go, well, if you can't play safety either, you can't do anything on this team, and you cut him. And you say, thanks, but no thanks. We'll just call that a bust, and we'll chalk it up, and we'll move on. That is going to determine McGlothern's roster odds as well, assuming he doesn't like do the Ivan Pace thing and just like leapfrog the draft picks, right? And of course, Kyrie Jackson in there as well is part of that mix. But if his roster spot's probably pretty guaranteed unless he's a total catastrophe. But it's pretty rare to have that kind of thing happen. So we'll see what happens with this. I'm at least intrigued because it's just a weird time for him to get first team reps. It's just not what the Vikings seem to be really doing with anybody else, which makes me think there's a better chance that there's some meaning behind it, but that doesn't mean that it's guaranteed. And we'll know for the first couple of days. If he's just not out anymore and he's just back with the threes, we go, oh, okay, they were just kind of messing around. And that's fine. Tomorrow, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. Probably, I've got the Aaron Jones Everyman is going to be pretty good, so maybe we'll do that. I will see you all for that, and as always, Skull.